Arsenal smashed their transfer record as Özil signs. Meanwhile, Bale is unveiled at the Bernabeu, while Kaká heads back to Milan. And we give you this summer's winners and losers. Joining me today are former Bayern Munich, Liverpool and Man City midfielder Didi Hamann and goal correspondent Greg Stobart. I'm Nat Coombs and this is the Transfer Talk End of Window Special. So Greg, all eyes seemingly on Spain on transfer deadline day and particularly on Real Madrid. Are you surprised that given all the players linked with a move away from the Bernabeu to the Premier League this summer, it was Özil to the Emirates that ended up being the big deal?
A little bit surprised, but my colleague Wayne Veazey reported on Sunday that Arsenal were in advanced talks over a move for Özil. They managed to get it over the line on Monday reasonably easily by the look of things. They got the medical done, they agreed personal terms. It'd been cooking all week in reality, and that is the big Arsenal signing that they were looking for.
It certainly will placate the fans, did he? Is he the player that they need, though, given the weaknesses in that squad?
I think he'll make a huge difference to Arsenal because he's a top player. I think he's had more assists in the last 4 or 5 years than any other player. I think Giroud, Walcott and even Cazorla, I think they will benefit greatly from him coming to Arsenal. At the same time, there's other areas in that Arsenal team that needed strengthening. And I'm a bit surprised they didn't go for a defensive midfielder, maybe a central defender as well, because these are areas where they have showed weakness in the past.
It sends a message out, though, to other players, doesn't it? Because everybody was criticising Arsenal for not being able to land a world-class player. They've done that now.
They have, and I think it's also a different mindset now for Arsene Wenger. He's done it once. They've been linked with Di Maria, who didn't come. They've been linked with Higuain. They ended up with Özil, arguably probably the best player they could have got from that Real Madrid team that was up for sale. But then again, he always stuck to his principles. And if you look at I think his most expensive buy in recent years was Reyes, who was a big flop. And he stuck by his guns. But I think with Özil will be a different story. I think he will justify his price tag and make a big difference for them.
Greg, Real fans won't be too disappointed that Özil's gone, given the fact they unveiled Gareth Bale. What a signing, it's finally done. How good a player do you think he's going to be at the Bernabeu?
Massive signing for Real Madrid. I think most people agree he's not worth 100 million euros. It's a hell of a lot of money, but he could well pay it back in the next couple of years, both on and off the pitch. For me, he was last season by a mile the best player in the Premier League. I have absolutely no doubt that he will score bags of goals in La Liga. The only question is how much he's going to be compared to Cristiano Ronaldo, because he's not at that level yet.
Well, the reason I asked the question, Didi, was because on the same day, Kaká, who was signed for 56 million back in 2009, went back to Milan on a free transfer. Alan Ray, one of our viewers via Twitter, says he was the one player I always wanted to play for Real Madrid. It's hard to admit he's been the biggest disappointment I've seen. It's a cautionary tale for Gareth Bale, isn't it?
Not really. I think Alan's got this one spot on, but you have to realise that Kaká came to Real Madrid when he was 28 or 29. For a player that relies on his pace, he was one of the quickest players travelling with the ball. Then it's a completely different story now, because he was obviously on the downslope when he signed for Real Madrid. He was World Player of the Year, I think, 2 years previous. Gareth Bale hasn't probably reached his peak yet. What he's done in the last 2 years has been phenomenal. I think he'll get even better. He'll be even better playing with better players. And I think it's a completely different story. I think Gareth Bale, the price tag is always one thing, but I think he'll pay Real Madrid back with big performances. And I think it'll be a huge improvement to their squad.
Greg, both Fellaini and Baines linked with Man United all summer long. A few weeks ago on the show, you said out of those two, the most likely player to end up at Old Trafford this summer would be Fellaini. You were spot on, but they paid over the odds, haven't they?
Yeah, I think Everton expected Fellaini to leave eventually, but even they wouldn't have thought that United would leave it quite so late. They missed the buyout clause, £23 million buyout clause at the end of July. They've ended up scrambling it through in the final hour of the transfer window for £27.5 million. It's way too much money for Fellaini, but they had to buy a central midfielder and they got it done. Part of it was that Everton were looking to replace Fellaini with James McCarthy, and the more McCarthy's price went up, as so did Fellaini.
Didi, one of our viewers, Keith, via Facebook, suggests that the reason why they've had to pay over the odds for Fellaini is because nobody wants to sign for David Moyes. Is that fair?
I don't think it's fair, but obviously the club lost the main attraction in Sir Alex Ferguson, because if you go back in in the last few years, very rarely, if a player got an offer from Man United, he turned it down. So if you have 10 players who got offered the contract, I reckon 8 or 9 would sign for them. Now this season, or this transfer window, you had Fabregas linked with the club in the end, Khedira was linked with the club. There were a couple of other players who were linked with the club and they all turned him down. Thiago was wanted by Man United, he ended up at Bayern Munich.
But to be fair, that's been consistent with quite a few Premier League clubs. Chelsea, Arsenal, they missed out too, didn't they?
Possibly, but then again, Man United is probably still the biggest pull in the Premier League, and Sir Alex Ferguson wouldn't accept getting turned down. They may have made offers and may have been turned down in the past, but then it didn't go public. And I think this is something United has to look at, because this is not the way they do things. It doesn't look good on the club, it doesn't look good on David Moyes, and I think they would have, or hopefully they would have learned an awful lot in the transfer window, because they didn't cover themselves in glory this time.
They've also massively missed David Gill, almost as much as they missed Ferguson this summer, because Ed Woodward, like David Moyes, has gone into an unfamiliar role and he's struggled. He doesn't have the contacts or the savvy in the transfer market that Gill did.
Would David Gill have allowed a situation like the one we saw surrounding Herrera take place?
Never, not at all. David Gill would have known exactly what was going on, and United made a mess of it, just as they did the Fabregas pursuit. They were in for Herrera, they never wanted to pay the money. There's a lot of talk that they didn't know how the buyout clause would even work in Spain. There's even talks of imposters pretending to represent Manchester United. It's an absolute joke. It shouldn't be happening to the biggest club in England.
Big bonus for United, of course, you'd think anyway, hanging on to Wayne Rooney, linked perpetually with a move to Stamford Bridge this summer. What type of player are we going to see this season at Old Trafford, do you think?
It's almost like having a new signing, him staying, but then again, how long can they keep him happy, because his role won't change. He had to play second or even third fiddle to Van Persie and Welbeck last season. I don't think this is going to change anytime soon this year. There's even talk about him playing in midfield. There was a reason he was unhappy in the first place. If they can keep him happy somehow, I think he'll be great for Man United, because he's a fantastic player. How long they can keep him happy for, I'm not too sure.
Chelsea missing out on him. Then they let Lukaku go out on loan again. That absolutely baffled me, did he?
Yeah, baffling is the right word, because if you tell me that Etu now, 32 years of age, after being playing his football in Russia for Angie for 3 years, is a better player than any of the 3 they already got, then I don't know what's going on. And very strange letting Lukaku go. They've got Torres, who came back into form back end of last season. Demba Ba hasn't really hit the heights he did at Newcastle, but then again, he's a goal scorer. I'm very, very surprised if Etu scores more goals than the pair of them, and Lukaku as well.
They were trying to deal Demba Ba as well, weren't they?
I think one of the reasons Lukaku's gone to Everton is because they didn't want to let Demba Ba go to a rival, and Tottenham and Arsenal were both sniffing around, so they thought they'd be better off letting Lukaku go to Everton, because they needed to get a striker off their books.
Another player Chelsea let out on loan, Victor Moses to Liverpool. Liverpool have done some great business, haven't they?
Yeah, they've kind of done it under the radar a little bit, Liverpool, but I think they've dealt really well in the transfer market. They bought some clever players, and you look at their front 3 now of Sturridge, Coutinho and Luis Suarez, that's as good as any in the league. I think they're a little bit weak in midfield, but they've made some good signings, and I think Sacco could be a very good player for them too.
Yeah. Did he? Dan Jackson commented on goal that Sacco is a quality signing, and he highlights the strength and depth that we now see at Anfield. Do you think they're genuine title contenders now, Liverpool?
I wouldn't go that far right now, but at least they gave themselves a chance to finish in the top 4, because this is the first step they have to do. They've not been in the Champions League for a number of years. But then again, I'm not too sure whether it takes much winning the Champions League, the Premier League this year, because apart from Manchester City, I think Chelsea has a lot of work to do. I'm not too convinced about their squad, especially defensively. Man United look a shadow of their former self, even though they won the league last year by 10 or 12 points. Fellaini will improve them, but I'm not too sure about them. So I think it's City's to lose. But then if you look at Spurs, Arsenal, even Liverpool with the signings they made, now Suarez staying there, a fantastic start to the campaign. Sturridge is scoring goals, not conceded a goal yet. 2 more centre-halves come in. Skirtle back in the team on Sunday has been absolutely outstanding. So they've got a lot of competition for places. And I think this was the reason they didn't compete last few seasons, because they didn't have enough competition in the squad. And competition brings out the best in players. I think they've got that in abundance this year, and if they carry on that momentum, I think the sky's the limit for that squad.
So there we go then, gents. After all this hype and speculation and wheeling and dealing, it's all over. Time to pick our winners and losers. Diddy, I'm going to go to you for the best and worst signing this summer.
I think the best signing could turn out to be Lukaku. He went on loan to West Brom last season. He scored 17 goals in the Premier League in a team that was, I don't want to say struggled. They had a good first half to the season, ended up scoring 17 goals. I think he could even better that this year, with Everton, because I think he'll get more chances. The likes of Pina, Osman, Baines still being there. I think he could score more goals for Everton than he did at West Brom. Worst piece of business has got to be Samuel Eto'o, a player 32 years of age who's been in the wilderness in Russia for 3 years, age of 32, to bring him back with the likes of Demba Ba, Torres and Lukaku still at the club is something I don't really understand, and you know, I'd be very surprised if he hit anywhere near the heights he used to hit for the clubs he played for.
Very symmetrical choice, did he? How about best and worst teams, Greg? Who's done the best business, who's done the worst business?
I think Everton had an excellent window, but for me it's Tottenham. They got €100 million for Gareth Bale, which is astonishing, but most importantly, they reinvested it. They signed 7 internationals. They did their business early. It was structured. The likes of Paulinho, Soldado, Lamela, Eriksson, they're all top internationals. They're going to have to settle quickly, but they could be very, very good and even challenge for the title in the next couple of years. Worst, Newcastle are in with a shout thanks to Joe Kinnear, but it's got to be Man United. Moyes came in with lots of promises. We thought he'd make a big statement signing. There were talk from Ronaldo to Bale, Fabregas, Thiago. None of it happened. They scrambled around for Fellaini on the last day of the transfer window. Their fans aren't happy. Got to be United, because I think they might even struggle to get in the top 4 now.
Okay, thanks Greg, thanks Diddy. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. I hope you've enjoyed all the coverage we've given you this summer surrounding the transfer window on Transfer Talk. For more about the stories that we discussed on today's show, head on over to Goal.